Hello everybody, I'm Eternal Flame here, and today I'm here to talk about Mahito. Now that Mahito has finally come to an end in the anime, I wanted to talk about Mahito and how strong he actually is, but I also wanted to take you guys on a journey, similar to what I did with my How Strong is Yuji video, where I take you on a journey about talking about Mahito's strength and where I think he ranks in the verse, as well as why I think he is so incredibly powerful. However, before we get into this video, be sure to like and subscribe, go ahead and make content like this, and let's get straight into the video. Now, thankfully, unlike my Yuji video, I don't have to make this video too long because there are basically only 5 really important Mahito fights to focus on in comparison to Yuji, where I have to look across the entire series and every opponent he fights. I still do that with Mahito, but Mahito fights a lot less people, which I'm very, very thankful for. So now let's look at the first fight he ever does in Jujutsu Kaisen, which is against Nanami Kento. In this battle, this is the first time we ever see Mahito fight, which is against Nanami, where Nanami and Mahito are able to fight somewhat relatively, with Nanami having a pretty decent advantage against Mahito, but Mahito is physically still able to keep up with Nanami, who Nanami is a grade 1 sorcerer, who is incredibly impressive nonetheless. And the fact that Mahito, via transfiguring his body and figuring out how to make himself faster on the fly, is able to blitz Nanami and touch him, which would have killed him normally if it wasn't for the fact that Nanami was so powerful and had so much cursed energy to defend his soul subconsciously. And this is where we're going to get into Idle Transfiguration and how that functions early now. Idle Transfiguration is the curse technique of Mahito, which allows Mahito to change the shape of people's souls as well as his own soul. As a result of that, it allows him to have several different perks, which we're going to go across in this video as they're introduced in the series. One of the first perks he gets is the fact that if you can't hurt his soul directly or touch his soul directly, you are completely unable to hurt Mahito. Furthermore, he's able to change the shape of other people's souls and basically insta one-shot them through that method, as well as turn them into his own weapons. Through this method, he was able to use this in order to distract Nanami and able to actually land a hit on him. However, if you're a strong enough sorcerer, you are able to subconsciously use your own cursed energy to defend against Mahito's soul touches. As a result of that, someone like Nanami Kento would require 3 touches in order to actually fully transfigure at least, according to Mahito's estimates up to this current point in the timeline. And this is one of the earliest signs of Mahito's strength, because this is basically infant Mahito. He was only recently born, but he was still able to do this and would have killed Mahito in 2 to 3 touches, who Mahito is an incredibly strong grade 1 sorcerer. Of course, Nanami was not overtime by this point, but this is still incredibly impressive because this basically means infant Mahito is able to 2 to 3 shot grade 1 sorcerers on the level of Nanami, which is insane. Furthermore, Nanami was also able to realize the potential of Mahito after he left, directly saying that cursed spirit is a child. If we're not quick in exercising him, we might pass them the point of no return, which is absolutely nuts, considering the fact he also knows about Jogo and the fact Jogo can do domain expansion, and Mahito is considered the point of no return by Nanami, which is absolutely insane. And this is only the first encounter we ever have with Mahito, immediately introducing him as this threat that needs to be dealt with now. As we then get into the next feat for Mahito, where Mahito battles against both Nanami and Yuji. However, before we even get into that, Mahito is also capable of casting a barrier over an entire school. As the battle starts out immediately with Yuji landing a punch on Mahito's face, but it should be noted, this Yuji is decently strong by this point, already having feats by this point that put him around the level of a grade 2 to semi-grade 1, and on top of that getting a rage amp even further to land this punch on Mahito, and Mahito still has superiority to him. But that is when Mahito realizes directly that Yuji is his own natural enemy, because of the fact Yuji can directly harm the soul thanks to Yuji having a secondary soul inside of him, thus making Yuji aware of the soul because there are 2 souls present in Yuji's body. As the battle starts out, Mahito immediately showing his creativity and adaptability, first changing his arms into wings in order to give him more knockback so he can jump back a further distance and get away from Yuji even faster. As Yuji notices he keeps distorting his body, should I stop trying to grab or throw him? While Mahito knows to stop trying to grow bigger in size, because that would just make him a bigger target because of the fact Yuji can hurt the soul, already showing Mahito's ability to adapt his fighting style and figure something out, even though he's fighting against someone who has a natural advantage against him because of the fact they are actually able to hurt him to begin with, which is when Mahito alters his arms, changing it to literal chains with knives at the end of them in order to start slashing at Yuji and breaking apart a massive wall on the school. It's absolutely nuts. Before Mahito then decides to change his arm into a drill, launch the drill arm at Yuji, and Yuji catches him before Mahito then makes spikes rise out from his arms on top of that. Mahito just shows his battle IQ all the time and his adaptability and malleability with this form, because this is just the first signs of many of his malleability in combat and just how good he is at changing his shape and flow on the fly. However, this is when Mahito learns even more about himself, and he learns if I overextend myself, I lose control and my durability weakens. And Mahito is just learning constantly as the battle continues, continuing to adapt by making spikes then rise out from him when he tries to idle transfigure Yuji in order to try and transfigure his soul. However, this is when we get introduced to another weakness that Mahito has, which is the fact Sukuna has far too powerful of a soul for Mahito to even try and transfigure. So basically, if your soul is too powerful and too high on a level, Mahito has no way to transfigure it. However, the only character who has ever shown this ability is Sukuna, and this is Sukuna we're talking about. Who it's also very heavily implied the strength of Sukuna's soul doesn't change between his fingers, because of the fact that Mahito directly notes that while Jogo has more cursed energy than Sukuna, Sukuna's soul is on a completely different level. This is also when Yuji completely bombards Mahito in his stun state with a massive amount of physical hits, and it should be noted this is still a massively rage-amped Yuji who's likely just getting stronger because his rage just continues to grow more and more. However, this is when Mahito changes the shape of his form again in order to make his arm into a massive mace to try and smack Yuji directly. However, that doesn't work as well because Nanami arrives in order to break it, which is when we start to get into Yuji and Nanami versus Mahito, where Mahito first starts out by turning his body into a porcupine, but he does note that this is not a good tactic to use against people who are more experienced, and only good to use against people who are much weaker in comparison to Yuji and Nanami. And this is when Mahito spits out a bunch of his transfigured humans that he had directly stored for a bit in order to separate Nanami from Yuji, so he could battle Nanami alone. However, this doesn't work for too long because Yuji takes out transfigured humans, which is to Mahito's surprise, as Yuji and Nanami begin to jump Jujutsu Kaisen Mahito, eventually leading to Mahito awakening a domain expansion in the result of being jumped. However, Yuji ends up breaking through the barrier on the outside because on the outside the barriers are weak when it comes to domains, which results in Mahito directly having to transfigure Sukuna and Mahito ending up dying as a result because Sukuna no longer felt like sparing him. But this is when Mahito ends up escaping himself in order to leave the battle and flee to live another day. The next time we see Mahito fight is directly in his battle against fully restored Mechamaru, where he destroys several of the Mechamaru puppets, which are all around the semi-grade 1 to grade 2 level, which he's just destroying several of them with relative ease before he has to fight against Ultimate Mechamaru, where in his battle against Ultimate Mechamaru, he does extremely well, ending up winning, mainly because Ultimate Mechamaru cannot harm Mahito with most of their attacks other than the simple domain-based attacks. But it should be noted as well, Ultimate Mechamaru has special grade levels of output as stated by Geto himself. However, Mahito, even after getting baited to activate his domain, which puts his technique on cooldown, was able to outplay Mechamaru and trick him and go inside of his domain. Furthermore, in the anime, he does show off a few extra good shapeshifting feats, like shapeshifting into that of a bird and a mouse, which are both very good for actual mobility feats. However, Mahito is still ultimately able to defeat Ultimate Mechamaru. And we're now going to move on to one of his admittedly less but more important fights. It's super weird, which is his fight directly against Satoru Gojo alongside all of the other disaster curses, aiding him and backing him up in order to seal Gojo away. There aren't too many important things to note from this fight directly, other than the fact that Mahito has similar levels of combat speed to people like Jogo and Choso, considering the fact he is still able to keep up with him, albeit they're having to fight at a range, in comparison to Jogo, who can go up close and personal with them. But the more important thing is this. We learn that before Mahito goes to the fight, he has transfigured a total of 1,000 transfigured humans, so he's used his techniques at least 1,000 times, if not more, because we know there are even more transfigured humans going throughout Shibuya at this current time, because we see a lot of them in Shibuya in this arc, and Mahito is able to still do all of that and have cursed energy reserves, which is absolutely nuts, because that is so much cursed energy, because of the fact that means Mahito used his curse technique at least 1,000 times and still was able to fight people later after, which I'm going to talk about now. There is also the fact that Mahito sees the 0.2 second domain expansion from Gojo, however I'm going to focus on that a little bit later into the video rather than right now. However, before we get into the huge cluster fight that is Yuji, Nobara, and Toto versus Mahito, there is one more important thing that I think really needs to be noted. After Jogo is killed by Sukuna, Jogo directly knows that Mahito will be able to surpass all of the disaster curses, and that Mahito has even more potential than Jogo does. This is an important thing because of the fact Sukuna directly says that Jogo had the potential to reach the levels of Satoru Gojo if he did the right things and burned everything to asunder instead of focusing on trying to make cursed spirits human. So basically, someone who already had the potential to reach levels of Satoru Gojo has less potential than Mahito. Which I don't think I need to tell you the insanity of what Mahito should be fully capable of. However, we don't really see the full scope of that potential. It's just noted to be there, which is absolutely insane and should definitely be brought up nonetheless. Now, I do want to note I'm mainly planning to use the anime's interpretation, mainly because the anime doesn't really exclude anything from the manga's version of the fight that I think is too important to exclude, as well as the fact that Mahito in the manga should be capable of doing everything that Mahito shows off in the anime. It's just the anime shows off his capabilities a lot more and a lot better, so I'm going to be focusing on that one instead. Now, before I do talk about that fight, I do need to talk a little bit about how strong Yuji is, purely because of the fact Mahito directly scaled off of and above the Yuji that he is fighting. At the start of Shibuya, Yuji is directly stated to be on par with Nanami in terms of striking power. Now, there are several interpretations for it. My own personal interpretation is what I consider the middle ground, where Ino is considering Yuji to be on par with Nanami in overtime striking power. The reason why I consider it that is because he directly says striking power, so I do think he's only talking about Nanami in overtime, and I don't think he is directly talking about Nanami using the ratio technique. However, I know there are different interpretations out there, but I just want to put that out there. And then Yuji goes even stronger from his battle against Choso because he realizes his purpose and starts to turn his negative emotions into cursed energy. He then gets an even bigger amp because of the fact he has to consume 11 more fingers from Sukuna, on top of the fact that he has to deal with the massive negative emotions of Sukuna destroying a mass amount of people and a mass amount of Shibuya in Yuji's own body. So all of those negative emotions are being turned into cursed energy as Yuji steals his resolve in order to make sure he's not focused on the fact that he just murdered a lot of people, because he needs a relief from all these negative emotions he's feeling at the current moment. And that is the Yuji that is currently battling against Mahito at the start of the fight, who Mahito is even stronger than, after making Yuji have to suffer through watching Nanami die. Where at the start of the fight, he's already feeling a massive rage amp because of just the fact he just saw Nanami die, but at the same time, his rage is kind of overflowing him right now, which is making it harder to control his cursed energy, as Toto talked about all the way back in Goodwill. So let's just do a quick rundown of everything that Mahito does in the solo fight between Yuji and himself, where he immediately starts out by using a transfigured human to make a wall in order to catch Yuji off guard, and in that wall it then turns into spikes that launch at Yuji that Yuji immediately shatters, as he then uses body repel soon after to launch Yuji back, and he directly states himself after punching Yuji in the face with a bladed-like hand that if he put more force into it, the battle would have been ended right then and there. This is when Mahito starts to go on the entire "I'm you" speech to Yuji, and Yuji resolves himself even further, calming himself down, because he directly says Nanami would never make the mistake of losing himself to anger as they begin their own hand-to-hand clash, which Yuji has the advantage in, which results in Mahito admitting to himself that he should not get close to Yuji in personal, because that is incredibly dangerous for him, because Yuji is that much better of a close combat combatant. So Mahito has to stick to using transfigured humans in this battle. As later on in the fight, Mahito then hyperextends his body to attempt to slam it into Yuji, before turning his own arm into a gun to shoot out transfigured humans at Yuji. Mahito is incredibly creative, as I've been trying to hone in this entire video and this entire time, that this man is smart and creative. Mahito also turns his arms into blades, which are capable of slicing directly through concrete as well, as Yuji got into the elevator. And then Mahito does the most sus move in the entire anime, where he tries to kiss Yuji and then turn his kiss into a blade. Mega sus. In this fight, he also uses a human as a shield and a way to cover himself in order to make it so he can jump out and punch Yuji directly in the face to catch him off guard and sucker punch him. As then soon after, Mahito's double ends up fighting directly against Nobara. And this is when we find out this entire fight against Yuji, Mahito was not at full power because his power had to be split with the double. Now, in the next episode, we don't get as many impressive feats for Mahito. Mahito does use a human as basically a bomb in order to distract Yuji and blind him for a second. However, he then takes a step back and then results in Nobara using resonance right when Mahito's about to land a hit, leading Yuji to land a massive barrage of combos on him. But that speaks to Mahito's durability more than anything, because he is able to tank several of Yuji's direct punches of him being punched into a wall. And I've already gone over how much stronger Yuji should be by this point, and that is absolutely insane. However, he then later on kills Nobara after reuniting with his clone and fusing with his clone once again, before he then lands a Black Flash, unlocking 120% of his potential. On top of that, Mahito is even more in tune with his purpose at that moment as well, which gives an even further amp in Jujutsu Kaisen, because repeatedly, your mentality has been shown to amp you in Jujutsu Kaisen, from Hanami getting stronger and doing even better in a fight because they mentally imagine themselves having fun and mentally are they accepting of the fight in their true nature, all the way to Megumi being able to do better against Toji because he could envision himself winning, or him being able to unlock his domain expansion. Several characters get mental amps like this, and Mahito is no exception, so he got even stronger from that point on top of the Black Flash amp. As then we get into Toto and Yuji versus Mahito, where Mahito does several more creative things, like turning half of his body serrated in order to make it so Toto can't really hit him that easily, from turning humans into hammers for him to use, from swords and all of that good jazz, until both Toto and Yuji land their own Black Flash, and all of them are now operating at 120% of their potential. As Mahito uses Body Repel even more to just break the area completely, while also using his clones in order to distract, before he figures out how to make polymorphic soul isomers. I hate that name with a burning passion, by the way. However, the polymorphic soul isomers is a combination of several weak souls that were rejections, but as a result of that, they have incredible amounts of power in exchange for having extremely low durability. Enough power to the point where they're able to launch Toto back through buildings, and are also able to keep up with Toto in speed as well, which is incredibly impressive, considering the normal transfigured humans are around the grade 2 to grade 3 level. But these things are able to kick back Toto, and this is a Black Flash amp Toto. However, Toto is also capable of one-shotting them, so they're not too impressive. As it's then right after, Mahito lands a 0.2 second domain expansion because he saw Gojo do it, and he remembered that experience. Which, as a result of that, it took away Toto's hand before Mahito landed another Black Flash on Toto, and then Yuji landed a Black Flash right after Toto did a clap, but as a result of that, he lost the ability to use Boogie Woogie once and for all. As we now get into Mahito's peak, his instant spirit body of distorted killing. After Mahito landed another Black Flash, he was able to reach even deeper into his soul and potential, which allowed him to utilize this new form because he had a deeper grasp on his soul, as a battle began between Mahito and Yuji, where, while the two of them were similar in strength and speed, it was the point where Mahito was the stronger out of the two of them. However, Yuji's normal punches could not reach Mahito, and Yuji needed a Black Flash in order to even do something and actually win the fight against Mahito. Furthermore, as the battle continued, Mahito grew and grew even more, but Yuji did meet him in that growth. Eventually, after using some trickery, both with the diversion fist and Toto doing one final diversion, they were able to put down Mahito and end him for good, with Yuji landing another Black Flash in the process. However, that right there is the end of Mahito's journey. And all this is just to say, Mahito is an absolutely insane foe. At the peak of the special grade curses, debatably one of the strongest disaster curses, depending on how you feel about Mahito versus Jogo, I don't want to get into that, and has hexes that allow him to fight several of the strongest people in the verse. But more than that, an ever-growing potential that would allow him to match anyone and anyone who was fighting him, so long as they don't have that same potential to grow that Mahito will pull out of them like he did with Yuji Itadori. Mahito's power should not be downplayed or understated, because it needs to be remembered this: Yuji is by far and away the best counter to Mahito, with Nobara also having the capability to hurt Mahito on top of that, and Toto having the most annoying technique to fight against someone like Mahito who requires direct contact, and they still just barely won ultimately at the end of the day in this fight. Now, I do think Mahito did get power clipped, unfortunately. However, at the same time, Mahito's hexes, and if he had the time to grow, would be a threat to a lot of people. However, if I were to put Mahito currently where he was right before he died at his hypothetical peak, where he could have all of his transfigured humans that he already had on him, as well as being in his true form, I would put Mahito right in the top 20 for Jujutsu Kaisen characters, maybe somewhere in the top 15, but I would certainly put him in the top 20. He's easily taking out everyone who is on the grade 1 category of sorcerers, which would include the likes of Domain Expansion Megami, Yuji Itadori in the Culling Games, Naobito, and Naoya. He would be able to beat all of them. Now, I don't think he would be able to beat them easily, but I do think he'd be able to beat them nonetheless. He is easily above the grade 1 category, but unfortunately, he just doesn't make it into the special grade sorcerer category and the characters who are in the special grade levels. However, that's my opinion on where I think Mahito scales. I want to see what you guys think down below when accounting for all of his hacks, his abilities. And I also want to hear, what do you guys think Mahito's full potential would be and how terrifying that might actually be in Jujutsu Kaisen? Anyway, I'm going to see y'all later. Peace out. Have a good day.